Hey guys, it's Kayla and today I'm here to finally do my November wrap up. So in the month of November I read 13 books. What? I read 7 audiobooks, 3 physical books, and 3 ebooks. I participated in 2 readathons, 1 half-assed, and then a 3rd I wanted to and totally just didn't do it at all. So I participated in the Scallywagathon, kind of participated in the Contemporary-thon, and wanted to do Tome Topple since I have access to A Clash of Kings. However, I was just not in the mood to read it, and instead I read a ton of middle grade. And then also this month I completed my Goodreads yearly goal of reading 50 books, and so now I'm surpassing that, and I am just what? Because pretty much for like the whole year, Goodreads kept on telling me that I was like 6 and 10 and whatever books behind my goal, so take that, Goodreads. Okay, I'm going to go in order of the way I read them this month. The first book I read this month was Bird Box by Josh Malerman. I gave this one 4 stars and I read it on audiobook. Bird Box was so good. Thank you. Bird Box was so good. It was probably the most thrilling book besides Misery by Stephen King that I've ever read, and this is my first like thriller I ever listened to. It was just so suspenseful. I would say it's more suspenseful than thrilling. It's just so eerie and you don't know what's gonna happen next, and then since I was listening to it, I really didn't know what's gonna happen next, because when I'm reading text, whether it's a suspenseful part of the book or action-packed or like a love scene or something that I'm really excited about, my eyes jump ahead and I can't control it. I just get so excited my eyes kind of jump to like the bottom of the page or like the next page. And so listening to it, you can't do that. So I was just like sitting there like being on the edge of my seat the whole time. It was awesome. So in Bird Box there's this creature or creatures that appeared in our world, and if you see them you go crazy, you kill those around you, and then you kill yourself, and no one knows what it is. If you just barely get a glimpse of it, it happens, and the story is basically about that, and it takes place in 2 different times. One is the present time, and then one is 4 years prior with our main characters, and each chapter pretty much bounces back and forth through the times as it kind of reveals things throughout the book, and it was really great. The only reason why it's not a 5-star for me was I just didn't 100% love the ending. Okay, the next book I read, which kicked off Scallywagathon, was The Raft in the Dawn by Renee Audier. I gave this 5 stars and I also listened to it on audiobook. This was such a surprise, you guys. I went in not knowing a whole lot, and it was just so engrossing. I just loved it. I loved the characters and I loved the storyline. It was a perfect balance of both for me, especially in YA. It was basically the retelling of 1001 Nights, where the bride tells a story to her new king husband to prevent him from killing her, because he has taken a bride each night and then kills her. So it's kind of the YA version of that, only there's so much more to it. I actually like experienced my first character crush. Like, I love Khalid so much. That's never happened before. Also, I love Shazi. I love both of the love interests in this book, which normally I like one way more than the other, or I only like one and not the other. I love both of these main characters so much, and I was just... Next I read Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shannon McGuire. I gave this one 4 stars and I read it in an ebook. So many moons ago I read Every Heart a Doorway, which is the companion novel to this book, and I was so disappointed. However, I was looking forward to this one because I knew what to expect, and the characters in this book I really did like from the previous novel. and I really liked it. I love the setting. It takes place in the moors where it's very dark and gothic and eerie, and it's just such a fun read in the sense that it feels very middle grade, but it's not. Like, there's lots of blood and gore and foul language, and it's just kind of a weird hybrid of the two. And I just thought it was a huge step up from the first book, in my opinion, even though I think many people feel they like the first one better. I like this one way more. And then next I read The Reptile Room by Lemony Snicket. I gave this one 4 stars, even though I think I changed it to 5 stars on Goodreads. 4 or 5 stars, and I listened to this on audiobook. So, you guys, I love A Series of Unfortunate Events so much. Like, for me, like, I love Harry Potter. I mean, I get it, it's fun. My childhood is Lemony Snicket and The Series of Unfortunate Events, and the Baudelaires, and the Quagmires, and Count Olaf. That's my childhood, and rereading these books so far has been so much fun. This audiobook that I listened to was a new narrator. The Bad Beginning I listened to was a full ensemble cast, and this one was just one narrator, but it was really fun because his Uncle Monty sounded just like Nigel from the Wild Thornberrys, so that was really fun. But yeah, it's just a continuation, and this one really kicks it off. The Bad Beginning is just kind of the beginning, and The Reptile Room and so forth is their experience with these, discovering their new caretakers and kind of the reveal of Count Olaf and his henchmen, along with any other twists and turns. So yeah. So after that, I read The Rose and the Dagger by Renee Ahdieh. I gave it 4 stars, and I read this one on ebook. This is the sequel to The Wrath and the Dawn, and I didn't love it as much as I loved the first one, although I really still liked it. I thought it was an exciting conclusion. It is just a duology. It ends on a good note. It wraps things up pretty nicely. I don't know what it is. I guess I just liked the first one a lot better. I liked how intimate it was. This one, the world kind of got a little bit bigger. I don't know. Can't put my finger on it, but I still really liked it. I love the duology. I'm actually interested in reading some of the novellas just so I can dive back into the world a little bit. Normally I'm not a fan of reading novellas in series, but this was a great conclusion. Okay, so the next book I read was Identical by Ellen Hopkins. I gave it a 3-star, and I read this as a physical book. So I read this during Contemporary-a-thon. This was like my taboo pick, among other things. And oh, this was such a hard book to read. So I knew going in it was gonna be taboo. But you guys, seriously, it has trigger warnings for everything. Everything. It was a hard read. It made me physically upset. It was hard to read as a person, it was hard to read as a parent, and I just wanted to be done with it. And honestly, once I finished it, I felt like I regretted that I read it. I feel fine now that I'm away from it, but that experience was so hard, and I remember feeling like I regretted reading this book. I've never felt that before. So Identical is basically just about these twin girls and their family. And the storyline is just kind of a slice of life. The only main storyline is just kind of the reveal of why these people are the way they are, and the mother is running for Congress. And this is my first Ellen Hopkins novel. I didn't realize it was one of the prose short stubby books until I picked it up from the library. So it is written in prose. I've never done that before. That was really enjoyable. Probably the only enjoyable part of the book. And it was easy to read. Like, you just read like you normally would, including the titles, and it kind of reads just like a novel. There's even some dialogue, even though it's not actually written as dialogue. And then when it changes from the twins' perspectives, they each have a side of the book. The pages are facing each other, and they have the same like pull-out words, and then those words kind of make an eerie sentence, if that makes sense. So it was very interesting, it was very visual. I think I would like to pick up another Ellen Hopkins book, but even looking at Goodreads, many people who have read some of her other books have mentioned that this one is the toughest read, and it's like kind of the darkest, and it was just really hard. And I like taboo and hard every once in a while, but this one, it goes there, you guys, and it's pretty graphic. If you're interested in those kind of things, check it out. Otherwise, I would maybe not pick it up. So after I read that, I was kind of in a reading slump. It took me a whole week to read that book, even though it was written in prose and kind of went by fast. The subject matter was so hard, and afterwards I was really in a poor mental state. So then I picked up The Wide Window by Lemony Snicket, and oh my gosh, this was just what I needed. So far The Wide Window is my favorite. I gave it 5 stars and I listened to it on audiobook, and this was the first one that was narrated by Lemony Snicket, and I think he is my favorite narrator for the audiobooks. He has this perfect tone of voice. It's very soft, and then, which I imagine that's kind of how Lemony Snicket would speak. Obviously it's him, I guess. And then he has the perfect voices for Violet, Klaus, and Sunny. And the only thing that stinks about his narration is that he is so kind of quiet and soft for those characters, that his Count Olaf and whoever the current guardian is so loud and like striking that if you're listening to it with headphones on, it really hurts. Or even like in my car, it was like I had to turn it up so much for a good chunk of it that when one of those 2 other characters spoke, it really hurt my ears. So that's the only thing that kind of sucks about Lemony Snicket narration. Otherwise, I like his voice the best for the books. But The Wide Window was hands down the funniest that I've read so far. I was literally laughing out loud. I liked so many quotes from that book on Goodreads. It just filled me up, and it was the perfect pick-me-up after Identical, and I'm so grateful for it. So next I read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Abertali, and I gave this one 5 stars, and I read this one as a physical book. This was the Hot Mess Book Club book pick of the month for November, and I was so glad that it was picked because I probably would have gotten to it eventually, but YA Contemporary just lets me down all the time unless there's some kind of magical element to it. I'm just not interested. I'm not interested in reading about high school anymore. However, this one, I loved it, and it was such a great unexpected surprise. It felt real. It felt like high school to me, and I honestly saw myself in Leah a good majority of the time. She didn't have a whole big part of the book, but Leah is just one of the best friends of Simon, the main character in the book. I never really saw myself in a book before, so I don't know if I was just subconsciously like trying to be aware of that since it was like a question and a tag before, or it really just kind of stuck out to me that this felt like me now and in high school in the best way, in like a good way. I'm sure you've heard all about Simon. It seems like everyone's kind of reading it now since it's, you know, 1, a really good book, and B, it's about to be a movie, and the trailer just dropped. So it's just a coming of age story about these teenagers in high school. One of them is trying to come out / gets outed for him, and it's just kind of about him and that experience and his friends and their experience. And it's great, and it gives me the warm fuzzies, and normally I'm not about that, but for whatever reason this book just was a 5-star read for me, and I'm so grateful for it, and I cannot wait for Leah on the Offbeat, which is the companion or sequel to Simon, coming out next year. Okay, then I think this is about time when like Tome Topple was supposed to start, and I was like, you know what, I just want to read middle grade, so I picked up The Fairy Tale Detectives by Michael Buckley. I gave this 4 stars and I read it on ebook. This is basically just kind of a middle grade version of Once Upon a Time, the TV series, where it's all these fairy tale people, all these fairy tale creatures, they're called ever afters. They live in this one town, they can't leave this town, and a family member of the Grimm family has to always be there, remain there in the town to document the stories of the ever afters. And it's just about these 2 girls. They discover how they fit into this world, and then there's this little storyline that happens It brings in so many characters. Some of the characters are just like they are in their books, more or less. Some kind of change. They can change and look more human if they're more animal in the books. And it was a really fun read. I love Once Upon a Time, and to read kind of a middle grade version of that was really fun. And I'm definitely going to continue on with the series. Okay, next I hop back to The Miserable Mill by Lemony Snicket. I gave this one, this is the one I changed. I gave this one initially 3 stars, and I changed it to 4 stars. And I listened to it on audiobook. This one was narrated by Lemony Snicket. I remember this one being my least favorite in the series that I have read when I was little, and I still feel that way. It just felt like there wasn't any kind of unique essence to the storyline. It seemed like everything else before kind of had like kind of a tricky twist to the plot or the reveal in some way. And this one, I don't know, this one just felt a little bit flat for me. Although I still liked it, there was still an interesting essence to the plot line. It just wasn't as good as the others, in my opinion. And then I read The Austerity Academy by Lemony Snicket. I gave this one 4 stars and listened to it on audiobook. This one was narrated by Lemony Snicket, and this one stepped it up again. Vice Principal Nero, who is the Baudelaire's guardian in this one, is just the worst. I honestly, he feels worse than Count Olaf. He was just a despicable person, obnoxious person. He made fun of the kids. He mimicked them. He was mean to the teachers. He was just seriously the worst yet of all the characters in the series, in my opinion. And it was in a good way. It made it really fun, even though it was obviously horrible for the Baudelaire orphans. And also in this book, we were introduced to the Quagmire triplets. And then with the Quagmire triplets, we get introduced to VFD, and this, I remember, is just when the series really takes off. This is where there's more of an underlining story that connects the rest of the books together. And yeah, it was such a great read. After that, I read The Ersatz Elevator by Lemony Snicket. I gave this one 5 stars and listened to it on audiobook. This one was narrated by that second narrator, the Nigel Thornberry sounding guy. And this one was so fun just because they're back in their hometown, and so there's that somewhat comfort level. They live in this penthouse with this rich couple, and so they kind of get everything they haven't had since they lived with their parents. However, they're with such horrible people that they are still so alone and so neglected in such a different way than they've experienced before. And it was so funny. And then the last book I read this month, I finally read One Dark Throne by Kendare Blake. And I gave this one 4 stars and I read it as a physical book. Now, I'm not sure if I was putting this off because I didn't think it was gonna live up or what it was, but everyone and their mom on Goodreads says that this one was so much better than the first, and I just don't agree. Sadly, One Dark Throne just did not live up to the hype for me. I still really liked it. I love the world, I love the sisters, I love the queens, I love their friends and the island, and it definitely did give you a lot more, and there was just so much action in this sequel, and I think that's what everyone wanted. But I wanted more of the world building and the eeriness and the suspicion and the secrets. That's what I want. And that's why I love the first one so much, because there's a ton of that and not as much action. And this one is very action-packed. The whole book takes place during the Ascension year, which is the year that the triplets have to kill each other to become the one queen of Fenburn Island. And yeah, I mean, a lot happens and it's really great, and I'm excited for the 2 novellas that are coming out in the next few months. But yeah, I'm just in the unpopular opinion that I liked the first one way better than this one, but it was still a great read and I can't wait to continue on. Okay, so those are all the books I read this month. Oh my goodness. I would like to thank A Series of Unfortunate Events for getting me to my 50 goal. That wasn't why I picked them up. I was just in a mood to reread them / finish the series. Okay, I'm tired of talking. Thank you guys so much if you stuck through all this. I know I read a lot this month. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!